Hello, hello, good afternoon, everyone. This is Pana. I'm Chad's wife and also his caregiver. So I'm here today to give you a little bit of the caregiver perspective of what it's been like to support Chad during his cancer journey. This has been a long road for us, and we thought it would be important for me to also share things from my perspective of what it's been like as we're going through um, this journey with Chad. So, welcome to the channel. What's up with Chad Roye? Please take a moment to like and subscribe. So, like the video, subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate your support. So, as you may have heard, Chad is cancer free. He had an appointment a few weeks ago where we were able to get his test results that stated that he is MRD negative. So, MRD negative, and I'm going to make sure I'm reading so I give you guys accurate information, minimal residual disease negative. So, it's a term that's used in oncology that indicates that they did not find any cancer cells. So, they use a very sensitive test, and it came back that there were no cancer cells. But we're going to do a little bit of a flashback today because you can check Chad's videos where he will be able to give you his own perspective on what it was like to receive that result. I'm going to take you back to last fall, so about a year ago, or even before that. So Chad would have moments where he would be experiencing extreme back pain. And at times it was debilitating where he could barely get out of bed. And so, it was really hard to watch because to see someone that you love experience so much pain, somebody who's so active, if you all know Chad is up and about, okay? When we're going through the pandemic, Chad is the one who did the grocery shopping. He has a hot foot, as we used to say back in Grenada. Can't sit still. So to have someone who's very active in his community, Chad is a husband and father who's very active. He's not one of those people, those men who just sit home and expect the wife to do everything. Okay, Chad is one of the people who's doing laundry, he's picking up the kids, very active person, very involved person. And so to see him experiencing so much pain, because that's when we started to notice that something was wrong. He would go and get his epidural steroid injections for his back to help with the pain. But the pain persisted, right? It would go, he would get some relief and then it would come back. And then fast forward to November of 2024, that's when things started to take a downturn. Chad ended up in the hospital. And how Chad ended up in the hospital, I will just tell a little bit of that story. I'm not sure if he's told that story on here before. Chad was pretty much bedbound. And we may have mentioned that in some of our online postings. Chad was bedbound and couldn't barely, like I said, in a lot of pain, couldn't move. And, he had been to the hospital before. He had been to the ER. They would kind of dismiss things. They might tell him take some meds or whatever. But no one was really looking for cancer, No one was associating his pain with cancer. And so anyway, things started to take a downturn. It was his primary care physician, who called the EMS. He couldn't walk, he couldn't stand. So just imagine that. Like I said, he was bedbound. So his primary care doctor, she called the EMS to come because we were trying to figure out. I finally convinced Chad. We had convinced Chad because we had been in contact with his doctor that he needed to go to the hospital. So his primary care doctor called the EMS. EMS came, took Chad. And it was really a very, very sad moment for us, because at this point, we still don't know why this is happening. So anyway, Chad was at the hospital and they ran some tests. And so Chad had to end up being transferred to another hospital that had a cancer unit that dealt with multiple myeloma. So I remember when the doctor came in and she said, oh, we found some malignancy. She never said the word cancer. But I have been keeping track with the care notes in my chart. So, Chad had given me access to his my chart, which made it easier for me to advocate for him. So this is just a tip I would give you guys. If you have a loved one in the hospital, it really helps if you have access to their my chart, because you can see the care notes that the doctors are writing. You can see the test results when they come in, and it can really help you to be able to advocate for your loved one and ask questions, right? Because when the doctors come in, they're kind of glossing over things, and it can really help you to know what to ask for. So the doctor came in, she made this comment, and then she said, "Oh, she kind of downplayed it." And I told her, I said, "Well, isn't multiple myeloma a cancer?" And mind you, I was familiar with multiple myeloma already. So I was wondering why she didn't just come out and say it. So she's like, "Yeah, it's a cancer." And so that pretty much was the official day that we actually got the cancer diagnosis. Um, and this was a first for all of us, right? I didn't know anyone who had multiple myeloma. I was familiar with this type of cancer in terms of having, some knowledge about it. But I didn't know anyone who had multiple myeloma. And so I'll be honest with you guys, I was scared, right? And I'm one of those people who I start thinking worst case scenario. I think worst case scenario at first, and then I kind of backtrack and get a grip of myself. And so I was thinking worst case scenario, oh my gosh, we cannot not just afford in terms of money, but just afford in terms of we cannot lose Chad. You know what I mean? So I was really, really scared about the unknown. And that was the worst Thanksgiving ever. I'll just tell you guys that, because this was right around Thanksgiving. It was horrible because we spent all our holidays together. Chad was in the hospital during Thanksgiving. It was not a good situation for us. And losing Chad would have been devastating, not just for me, but for our children as well. Like I said, Chad is a very involved dad. And so, the emotional impact of hearing that Chad had cancer, not knowing what to expect, seeing the physical impact that this disease was having on him, it was really hard to watch. It was hard to absorb. It was hard to accept. But I'm also one of those people, when I get bad news, I start doing my research. I join, there are several multiple myeloma Facebook groups, support groups. There's one for spouses, there's one for people, there's mixed groups, there's one for Black people with multiple myeloma. There's one where there's patients and their caregivers are also. So that really helped me too, because I was able to hear from people who are going through it. And that helped me in terms of advocacy, in terms of questions to ask the doctor, and I must say our support circle really came through. Friends, family. I had family who sent food. We had, some financial support. Our neighbors. I just have to shout out our neighbors. We have the best neighbors. I mean, people were bringing groceries. People were asking, "How is Chad doing?" Our neighbors, family, friends, some people that I didn't even know. Okay, people were reaching out as soon as they heard. There were neighbors who were stopping me, asking me, "How's Chad?" Everybody was so concerned about how he was doing. Friends and family will also have also been a really good support. And so, I just want to shout out everybody. I also want to talk about the impact on the household and our routine. Like I said, Chad was very active. He was the one who picked the kids up off the bus, and stuff like that. So having understanding employers really helped. I was able to work remotely. In fact, I just went back to my regular hybrid schedule back after I returned to work, because I ended up taking a leave of leave from work for 3 months after Chad had his stem cell transplant, and then I returned to my regular routine of going into the office twice a week. Having an understanding employer is also a form of support as well, right? Because if your job is not understanding, that's going to cause a lot of problems for you as you're trying to juggle doctor's appointments and just being a real support, physical support for your loved one. And so the toll on the household. So pretty much now I was the one who had to do the pickups, the drop-offs, pretty much everything, right? Because Chad was, still in the hospital, and even when he came back home, so luckily for us, he was able to be discharged from rehab um, before before Christmas of last year. And so a lot of the support. So I just want to backtrack a little bit. When I talk about support, like I said, Chad is very involved in his community. So he's involved with his community board. Those individuals were also very supportive. So a lot of his community activists and people that he's involved with are also have been a great support for him. So coming back to the impact on the household routine, like I said, we all had to go to wearing masks, right? Because we don't want to get Chad sick. So that was a big adjustment for the kids, especially our youngest. Um, she had this thing where she thought that people would think she was sick if she's wearing a mask, and she's young. She was 8 years old at the time. She's 9 now, and so having her adjust to having to wear a mask. Our son, it was a little bit easier for him with the mask. So that was one thing. We all started wearing a mask when we went outdoors. I had to juggle like my schedule. We were able to get the kids into after school programs. That was a bit of a struggle as well, especially for our son, because it was a lot more involved for him to get him into his after school program. Because as you guys may have heard, Chad shared, he's on the autism spectrum. So I can't just go sign him up for any after school program. The program has to be able to suit his needs. And so, those are some of the adjustments that we had to make here in terms of how we navigated our community, just trying to make sure we're not coming back to make Chad sick. The support that we got from friends, family, and people in the community, our neighbors, etc. I also want to say support also for me as the caregiver. In addition to what I said about the household and the changes in our routine, there's also the going with Chad to his appointments, especially early on in his journey, making sure that I'm asking those important questions. If the doctor says something that we don't understand, Chad asks questions, I'm asking questions, I'm doing research, I have my notebook, I'm taking notes, I'm tracking things on my chart. Then there's also the medication, making sure he's taking his medication on time, and that he has the refills, that we're refilling his medication. If there's any symptoms or side effects that he's experiencing, and making sure that I'm sharing that with his doctor, that he's sharing that with his doctor. So there's also the support with medication, the advocacy with the doctors and staff. There's the navigating insurance, right? And the bills that come in. Because with all of this, there's a lot of bills. I remember one time we saw this bill in my chart. And this was from when he was getting chemo and one of his chemo injections. And the bill was like over $33,000. Of course, that was before the insurance hit. But I was like, what in the world? So just imagine, right, how expensive these treatments can be. And so can you imagine? I just have to come back to that. $33,000 for one injection. It's ridiculous. But that's a whole nother story for a whole other video in terms of healthcare in this country and insurance coverage for treatments such as cancer. If you see me looking to the side, I want to make sure I'm hitting all my notes. I want to make sure I'm not forgetting everything. So, getting advice from trusted people is really important. And for me as a caregiver, I was hearing it all, right? Oh, don't let him have chemo. Chemo is bad. He should drink this tea or take this supplement or do this or do that. And I'm saying it with that tone, but I don't want to minimize the value of holistic medicine. I think there is a place for that. But Chad and I made a decision early on that was not going to replace the advice from his doctors, right? From his specialists, because we trust his doctors, we trust his specialists. So yes, he can drink the soursop tea. He can have the soursop drops. I'm not minimizing. I've heard, good things about soursop. And there were, some other advice that we got. It seems like everybody becomes oncologist or cancer specialist when they hear that somebody has cancer. They don't even know whether if it's the same type of cancer as the person they knew, but they got advice for you. Just know that multiple myeloma is a blood cancer. So you can, so that's something to also keep in mind. So some of the things that may have worked for other types of cancer may not necessarily work for multiple myeloma. So we were doing more of a combination approach. He was still getting his chemo and his medications, and he was still taking his supplements. He would drink his tea. He would try to eat as healthy as possible, which is really important. So I'm not going to minimize that advice at all. But it was a little frustrating at times to hear, because it's kind of like that. That's what the person has to offer. Like, don't do the chemo. Just drink this tea. And it's really frustrating for somebody who's trying to get better, and for the people who are trying to support him. So, but it's all part of the journey, right? You kind of expect that and you roll with it. It's no big deal. So in terms of the stem cell transplant, that was another process that was really involved, right? Because Chad had to take these injections. Zarzio, I know I'm giving him flashbacks just by hearing the word Zarzio. There was one point where Chad did not even want to take the injection, right? He had to inject himself. He didn't want me to do it. I'm not a nurse. What do I know about injections? I have an injection that I take every month for migraines, and I could barely stomach that. So who am I to come and try to give Chad an injection? So we actually had the nurse practitioner at his doctor's office show me how to do the injection. So that's all part of being a caregiver, right? Learning how to administer medication. And the importance of this injection was to produce stem cells. So they needed millions of stem cells to be produced in order to be harvested for him to have a stem cell transplant. So I got frustrated with him at one point. I was like, well, if you don't get the injection, then what's the point of all of this? Anyway, he got it. He was, as you all know, he got his stem cell transplant. And so where we are now in the journey, Chad is now a cancer survivor. And I am so grateful. I'm so happy that, he made it this far. It was not an easy journey. As you all may know, multiple myeloma is one of those things where you don't get to ring the bell at this point, unfortunately, because the cancer does come back. But the point of the stem cell transplant and the treatments is to try to keep him in remission for as long as possible, right? That's the goal, to try to keep him in remission for as long as possible. So, we're very grateful that we can call Chad a cancer survivor. He's trying his best to get back into his regular routine. He still has moments where he feels fatigue. I'm back to my regular routine. We're all back to our regular routines, but we're still keeping in mind that, especially with cold, flu season coming back, to try to start back with the mask, at least in crowded places. That's something that we're doing. A caregiver's job is never done. So while I may not be going to all the appointments right now, I'm making it a priority to be there for the big appointments, and just to continue to be a support for Chad as he continues this journey. So, in terms of tips that I would give for people who are caregivers for somebody who has cancer, you have to be really organized. I already mentioned about having access to the My Chart. That can really help with advocacy. Learning as much about the person's condition as possible. So learning about their condition, because it can help you to kind of know what to expect as you're going along this journey. And it can also help you to be able to advocate for this person and just be a support for them, right? As things are happening, you know that, okay, this is why this is happening, or this is supposed to be happening. And so, that's something that I would share with advocates. Join support groups. Chad was able to join a support group that's affiliated with the hospital that he goes to. So encourage your loved one to join to get support, right? Because yes, you have family and you have friends, and I'm definitely not going to minimize the value of that. But there's nothing that can beat hearing from somebody who's actually going through what you're going through, right? Lean on your doctors and your specialists for support, and your community as well. And so that's what I would say in regard to being a caregiver. And take some time for yourself. Squeeze it in. It's not easy. I'll tell you this. We have 2 kids. There's work. I'm also in grad school. I'm finishing up grad school. And so it's a lot. And then another thing, as I mentioned, grad school, fall of last year, I was actually taking a class. I was auditing a class. And when I say thankfully, because when I withdrew from the class, right around the time I was doing my final, because I could not do the final. I was under too much stress. I had to withdraw from the class. It didn't affect my GPA because I was auditing. And I also skipped the spring semester. And now this fall, I'm finishing up my last class. And so, it was a sacrifice that I made, but I'll do it again because it's worth it, right? Chad is worth it. That's all I'll say. Chad is definitely worth it for me to have made that sacrifice, right? And so that's something that I would say, as a caregiver, you may have to make sacrifices, right? But try to remember to get that self-care in if you can. It might not necessarily be going to get your nails done or going to get your hair done. It may mean just taking a moment to try to get some exercise in or go for a walk, or even after everybody is asleep, just taking a breath, right? And keeping up with your doctor's appointments. Those are all some of the things that I would say to fellow caregivers. Even if you're caring for someone who doesn't have cancer, I think this advice can go across the board. And so, I just thought it was important to come on here and share my journey. I stayed longer than I had planned, but I thought it was important for me to come on here and just share what it's been like, how scary it was that we thought we would lose Chad. I was doing research on the life expectancy for people with multiple myeloma. And because of research and the medications that we have, people are living much longer with multiple myeloma. So that's something that I'm grateful for to be able to hear. And it gives me a lot of encouragement as somebody who's supporting someone who is a cancer survivor. So please join me in wishing Chad the absolute best as he continues as a cancer survivor. I may do a follow-up video, as we continue on this journey. You can support Chad by listening and, subscribing to his channel, liking his videos, sharing his videos with other people. Those are all really important. And so that's something that I would like for everyone to do. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share this with other caregivers. There might be some people who can relate to what I'm sharing today regarding what our experience was like with Chad. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Like I said, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and we appreciate all of your support. Take care.